Hello, welcome to my presentation. The app I built is called StockRun. Basically, an app where you can purchase stocks and watch their value go up, see what their value is now, also see their location and things like that. And by location, I mean like the company location, not the physical stock, because that would probably be impossible. All right. So basically, the screen you see right here, the left, that beautiful gradient is kind of the intro welcome page. It's just kind of to give the users a feel for the app and kind of the styles that it will represent. So that screen you see to the right is the main dashboard screen. You can see those are all the stocks that you've so-called purchased, which it's not real money, at least not yet. But those are all the stocks that you purchased through searching. So you'll hit an API. I think it's iexx.com. They have an API that just allows you to gather stock data when you give them a stock symbol in the query parameter. So yeah. All right, so that screen you see right there on the left is basically kind of the search screen. So I guess I should go back. So if you click that add button, right here in the top right corner, you will advance to this search screen right here, which will allow you to search through, I guess, the top NASDAQ stocks is what I kind of preloaded the app with. So yeah, and then if you were to click on one of those cells, like for example, if you were to click on Galapagos NV, it would just bring you to like a stock detail screen, which would kind of show you basically the name of the stock and the price. And then if you were to click that purchase button right there, it would just go back into your dashboard, which these are all the stocks that you've purchased so far. All right, so these two screens are the profile screen on the left, and then on the right is the map view. So basically the map view takes all of the stocks that you have purchased, and if it can resolve a location for the stock, so like let's say we have GoGo Inc. is in somewhere in California, looks like, it was able to find that, so it'll add like a little annotation. If it can't find the stock, because some companies are like online based or they just don't have a physical location, it just won't add it. And then to the left is kind of the profile screen. This is just kind of a screen I added that I can leverage hopefully in future development when we add a social component. Hoping to add some kind of social component so you can like play with other people, maybe compete on who would make the most money in like a stock league or something, given X amount of dollars, and then start and end date. So yeah, this is just kind of ideas for future development. And you can see right there, your score is based off of how many stocks you've actually purchased. So all the stocks that are in your kind of dashboard, my stocks screen, which is your home screen. Let's see what else. And then yeah, so you can also add your own profile picture, which you can just add a photo from your camera roll, or you can take a picture. Alright, so that about does it for the screens of the app. So now we'll kind of go into the class diagrams and the architecture. So you can see, and we'll start out with, let's see. Alright, we'll start out with like the most basic kind of data structure that I made, which was a stock. So it's just a pretty simple data structure. It has a company name, a symbol, and the latest price. And the nice thing about this was that I was able to use Decodable, which is a protocol in Swift, to transform from kind of an external representation into this stock type. So that external representation was actually JSON coming in from the API. So it was like basically to parse all that JSON, it was literally like a one-liner. Pretty cool thing. Just a quick fact about stock. But all right, so we'll move into the data source next, as it's kind of a big part of the app. All right, so you can see that we have a shared property on it of type data source if it's an instance of data source. So that is actually a singleton. Just allows for app-wide access of that data source object. The reason I chose to use a singleton was this was a pretty basic app. I didn't have to really worry about concurrency issues or other things like that. Um, but definitely something to watch out and be careful with when using that. You can see it has a context property just for the core data. All right, and some of its methods on the data source class are get price of company symbol, and that'll just retrieve from the API uh, the price of a stock given like the ticker symbol, which for like Google, I believe it's like Goog or something. I don't know. For Apple, it's like AAPL. So like that kind of gist. Um, which we will get into later about my troubles with converting from the full stock name, like Apple, to the ticker symbol, which was like AAPL. All right, and so for other methods on it, you can get user stocks, which this is kind of manipulating core data. You can update the user stocks within core data. You can save an image within core data. That would be done from the profile screen. You can delete images. That is a private method, so the only thing that will actually ever call that is saved image because we don't want multiple profile images, right? So every time we save an image, we delete the image if there is one. And then you can also get your profile image. So that'll also be used by the profile view controller. So yeah. Let's see. All right, so let's move on to our search view controller. There's a table view on that. We have a search controller, a stock, and then just search terms. So the search terms was basically a dictionary of string to string. And what this was, if you look in the, where is it? I believe it is, and okay, here it is. Sorry about that. So in the NASDAQ right here, that class, or it's actually a struct. I didn't know how to represent a struct within a UML diagram, but that struct right there, you can see how it has buckets. So I had to basically build this NASDAQ bucket struct kind of like monster type looking thing. Basically because there wasn't an API to transform from kind of a plain text search to a stock's ticker symbol. So I had to kind of download a CVS file of all the stock names and their respectful like ticker symbols, and then I basically just created this struct which had just static properties on it for like each bucket. So like if so all the A stocks in the NASDAQ were in the A bucket, all the B stocks in the NASDAQ were in the B bucket, etc. So that's what that little etc. is. I didn't want to write out every single property, but you get the point. So basically, going back to the search view controller, what that allowed me to do was take some kind of search query that the user would enter in, and then it allowed me to transform that into display the respectful like stocks for that search query. All right, so that's kind of an explanation of what the search terms are. That's just a kind of the stock name company to the ticker symbol. All right, so moving on to the methods, we have a view did load, pretty standard stuff. We have a back button pressed. That's an IB action, just take you back to the main stock page. We have a number of rows and some of the table view methods right there. Just the number of rows in section, did select row at, and then cell for row at. And then we also have the update search results, which this was part of the UI search controller, which allowed me to just handle those search results. So when someone enters the text change within the search bar, it will call that method. All right, so now we'll move on to map view controller. So this view controller has a map view and stocks. The map view is obviously just to hold the MK map view. It's a property of that type. And then we have a stocks array to just kind of hold the stocks that you actually currently have in your My Stocks dashboard. And that will just kind of, the map view will create annotations. So if you see right here, we have a setup map function that is called on view did load. And then from that setup map, we will take all the stocks, we will create a geo query geocode all the stock names, and then add the annotations from that location that's returned. And then you might be asking, well, Michael, not every company that's in the stock market has a physical location. All right, so I know that, and I know that geocoder isn't perfect, so we handled for that within there, and basically I only display the stocks that geocoder returns a result for. So yeah. All right, and then just we pass in a struct of type stock locations right here, so you can see this add annotations takes a stock of type stock locations, and that is just like a little data wrapper for stock and coordinate passed from setup map. All right, so now we'll move on to the profile view controller in the top right corner. So the properties on this are profile image, score label, and an image picker. That profile image is obviously an IB outlet. It's just kind of the profile image that the user has. It's set to a default one if they haven't set one yet. The score label is how many stocks they actually have in their stock dashboard. So it's just kind of a simple counter that gets incremented in the data model every time that they purchase a stock. And then we have an image picker, which just allows access to the camera roll and then actually to the camera. Then we just have a couple methods, like an image picker controller method, which will just return the image that's actually picked or taken. Then we have a take picture button press, which sets off all these events, so that's pretty cool. Then we have a photo button press, which is an IB action as well, which will just set off the image picker events for that type. So we have kind of the distinction of are we opening the camera roll, which would be this one, or are we taking a physical picture, which would be this one? And basically the only difference between those is kind of setting the source type. So yeah, that's about it for that one. And then we will now move on to the stock detail view controller. So the stock detail view controller has properties stock. We have a stock name label, which is a UI label. It's like an IB outlet. And then we have a current price label, which is a UI label, and it's also IB outlet. So for the methods on this view controller, we have view did load, pretty basic. We have a back button press, which just sends them back to the dashboard, and then we have a purchase button pressed. So when this purchase button is pressed, the stock is actually added to the core data model. So in the back end, not in the back end, I guess in the local model on the app. And then so that can be reflected when the user goes back to the dashboard, right? So it'll call a refresh, kind of a refresh will be done on view will appear, and it'll see is there any new stocks that the user has bought, and then it will display those new stocks and update the table view accordingly. Alright, so this stock dashboard view controller is kind of the main dashboard view controller that you see in the app. It kind of shows all of my stocks. It's this one right here, this my stocks screen. And so we have a table view, and then we have a stocks property, which just contains all the stocks that the user currently has. Alright, so we have a view will appear and view did load. So on the view will appear, there's a function that is basically run every time, which is not a function, but some logic that just kind of updates the stocks every time the view appears. So where that comes in handy is if I were to be on the stock dashboard view controller, right? I were to click the add button, I progress to the search view controller, I purchase a stock, let's say Galapagos NV, I click purchase. So now this updates my model, right? Like my core data model. So when the view appears, because this method is called every time the view actually becomes the top of the hierarchy. So this will allow me to update this stocks property every time the view appears, right? So this ensures that if the user purchases a stock, it'll reflect in the table view. So that's just kind of the intuition behind that. So then we also have a refresh button pressed. So what this button does is it makes a call to the model, and this calls the IEX API that kind of gets us current stock prices for each stock that the user has purchased. So it iterates through all the stocks that they've purchased, and then it calls for each one. Would have been nice if the API allowed me to do batch requests. That might be something I would look into for future development. And then we just have our basic table view methods, right, that control what happens when they select at a certain table view cell, cell for row, and then the number of rows in the section. All right, so that about covers it for our view controllers. And I guess I should mention that the base kind of data structure. Oh, sorry, I already went over this. Mabi. Okay, so right down here, this is kind of the core data, I guess, models that we're using. And you can see they kind of reflect the stock in terms of naming and kind of type. But because they're kind of a different, it's a different model for the data, I had to create like some kind of a transformation. But one thing to note is that you'll notice that none of the view controllers ever references stocks from core data, like this stocks model. So that was an attempt from me to kind of abstract away core data and to not have to do any of that logic. And that logic only had to be dealt with within the data source. So you'll notice that there's no mention of stocks type anywhere within these view controllers, which is pretty nice. So I didn't have to get into the nitty-gritty of core data. I only had to do it once within the data source, and it was kind of like abstracted away from that. And it just kind of has the same properties: company name, latest price, and symbol. And then the profile, pretty basic right now, but we just have a profile image. There isn't a counter. You may notice that there's a counter on there, but basically that just calls the stocks, and it just counts all the stocks within the core data. So we don't really need a profile counter because then I'd have to maintain some kind of relationship between that. And that could evolve, right, as in future development. And then so finally, for the last things, you see this SR app bar, fonts, colors, and SR cell. So this was my attempt at making some kind of like UI kit or some kind of UI abstraction so I could reuse these UI components to give the app kind of a more unified and comprehensive feel, right? So these are just simple UI views. So this SR app bar is actually just a simple view that I physically placed buttons down on the storyboard, and it just has some methods like awake from nib, right, which gets called every time, and setup shadow, which would set up like a drop shadow, kind of look nice. This fonts class was just strictly a class. It just had some static properties for some fonts that I commonly used. Kind of tried to standardize what fonts I'm using. Yeah. And then we have a SR cell, which is just a UI table view cell. And then it has a cell label and the price label. And then we just have, the last thing we have is this colors class, and it has like just different static properties as well, kind of similar to fonts, of like teal, light blue, blue, dark blue, navy blue. Again, just to kind of standardize what colors I'm using within the app. And then the one last thing that I didn't mention is the initial screen, which is that very first screen that you see on the app startup. I'll scroll to it right now. That StockRun screen with the gradient, that beautiful gradient. Yes, that's kind of the first screen that you're shown. In future development, I plan to have like a whole setup and login there, so that won't really be shown every time, but for now it is. And that's just kind of an empty class right now, conforming to UI view controller. Future development, it should have some actual logic in there, but for now it's just an empty class. Alright, so we'll move on to our next diagram. Alright, so the view basically responds to all user interaction. It displays dashboard with currently purchased stocks. It displays the map view with annotations of the currently purchased stocks. It displays stock prices. It displays user images and current number of stocks purchased. It'll display interest screen with the go button, and then it'll also display search results of NASDAQ stocks. Alright, and then so basically some of the user actions for that are like navigation, refreshing, like selecting table view cells, etc. You could also buttons and like other UI control, right? Pretty standard stuff. For the controller, So we kind of get new prices of stocks in the dashboard, get price of currently selected stock. We kind of get location of currently purchased stocks. We can query our local NASDAQ data store for a user search request. We also handle business logic of user interactions and then retrieve data from core data and send data to be saved or updated. So I guess some of the user updates that are going to the view would be like updates to the stock dashboard, updates the user score, displays new data after the stock API call. We can display stock company location information, display profile information, picture, plus score. All right, so lastly, we have the model, which will store stocks into our core data. It'll update our stock info and core data. It'll also update profile image saved by user, update user's current score. It'll make an API call to stock API, the IEX one, to fetch the current price of a stock given a stock symbol. And then it communicates with the controller about any necessary data models, basically our stock or profile data. And it also serves as an intermediary between our core data object and client objects. And I guess to kind of expand upon that, that's kind of what I was talking about in the last slide about not having to ever reference our stocks object from core data and really to kind of be able to abstract that away from the app and not have to deal with that. All right, so we have our model updating the controller by saving stock information and then save profile information. And then we have our controller notifying the model by notifying that stocks need to be saved and then notifying profile needs to be saved, which would be the image or something like that. All right, so for our next slide, we will talk about some of the capabilities and limitations. So some of the capabilities of this app are it's a pretty good way to track your favorite stocks, right? It could be a good way to kind of watch some of your favorite stocks, kind of an intro to investing app even. And then some of the limitations of this app are that MapKit geocoder was not able to find all company locations. This might not be plausible, or this might not even be possible, as not all companies have a physical location, or geocoder isn't perfect and might not be able to find every instance, right? So yeah, that's definitely a problem, or limitation, should I say. All right, so our stocks are able to be searched are limited to the NASDAQ stocks, and that's kind of in reference to what I spoke about earlier with me having to have preload the app with a store of NASDAQ stocks to their ticker symbol, as I couldn't find an API, or at least a free API, that would allow me to translate between some kind of search query, such as like Apple, to its actual ticker symbol. So that's definitely a limitation of the app. You're limited to the stocks that I've preloaded it with, which are most of the NASDAQ stocks. All right, and then all data is also saved locally, so there's not an external database like Firebase. So basically, if you want to transfer your data from like one phone to another, let's say you get a new phone, you're basically stuck. So that was definitely a limitation. In future development, excluding some kind of database would definitely be a goal and something to add. All right, so some of the lessons that I learned were don't spend so much time building a UI kit. I definitely spent a lot of time doing that. Definitely wasn't worth it, as some of those components I built out I used once. So I don't know. That might be something better for the long haul, but for a short project like this, definitely not as worth it. But definitely a cool experience in learning how to do that and kind of how something like that would be done. I guess another thing would be don't worry about abstracting too much, and that kind of goes hand in hand with the UI kit. So I just kind of did some things that I only used once, but I know if I were to continue to develop this app, it would definitely be very useful, such as the buttons, the app bar. I would definitely be reusing that a lot. Yeah, so just things that would save me work in the long haul, but didn't really seem to come in handy. I think I might have gotten lost on a tangent on some of those abstractions that I was doing, but I think it all worked out for the better. So yeah, I think it's better planning that goes kind of hand in hand with the above 2 points, but just a better solid plan of what I was going to do and kind of how the app was going to take shape. I know I had originally planned to add a social component, but then I realized that it was just too big of an ask for the time period given. So I kind of had to cut that, and I had to start cutting a lot of features from the app because it was a pretty big ask. So I guess just better overall planning and kind of limiting the scope of my feature set that I want to include would be a very valuable tool, especially in a limited time scope like this. And I guess that can apply to like any kind of real world experience, right? You have to limit your scope um, to kind of not have some continuing development, right? So, but yeah, so those are some of my lessons learned. So I guess some improvements for this project kind of went over in the last slide, but I would hook up a database to allow for account creation, transfer of data between devices, add some kind of social component to allow for competitive stock leagues. You could like play with your friends or say like create like some kind of stock league. Like, hey, we each start out with like $1,000. You can buy these stocks and see who makes the most money at like in like a given amount of time. Cool idea. And then just clean up the UI to create a more standardized components throughout the app. So I guess that there are some components that I didn't get around to building, so I kind of just built them very quickly on the storyboard interface builder, and they didn't look the same. So you might be able to notice that in the app, some of the pictures. So I would definitely want to create some kind of standardized UI and just create like a comprehensive flow and feeling for the app. Yeah, and then so just some suggestions for improvement. I would definitely think that for this project, we should be allowed to explore other architectures than MVC. I know there's a couple out there, especially for mobile development, such as MVP, like MVVM, Viper, things like that. So I think those might add some value, and I think forcing people to do MVC is kind of restrictive. But I can definitely see the value in that, especially in first learning to develop mobile apps. But I definitely think that's something to keep in mind. Allowing people to branch out other than MVC, or maybe even introducing other design patterns and architectures and other than MVC. But yeah, just a suggestion. And the other thing would be not forcing people to use a map view or give potentially more choices. If you didn't notice, the map view within my application seemed a little bit forced. It was kind of random. Like, why would you have a map view? Like, why do I care about the location of these stocks? Like, why do I need to see it on a map? It's a cool feature, right? But it seems kind of useless. And the only reason I included that in there was because it was a requirement for the project. But I really think it wasn't useful. Like, it didn't bring any value to the app or didn't serve a real purpose. So I think that kind of giving more options for people would be something really valuable. All right, so that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.